Today we'll be doing one thing and one thing only, which is reading The Wolf is Loose, honoring Renee Good by fighting back. January 8th, 2026. ICE agents in Minneapolis murdered Renee Good yesterday, shooting her after asking her to leave the vicinity of an ongoing ICE raid. Renee was recording said raid well within her rights to do so. She died next to her wife, sitting in the passenger seat as the ICE agent fired unprompted into their car. He did so, a masked gunman armed and armored versus an unarmed woman, as Renee drove away from the officers, when she complied. She followed their order to leave, and they killed her anyways. Such is fascism in action, the state hammering any who dare to speak out, cops killing witnesses, whistleblowers, and activists by design. The Wolf is Loose fights back, exploring the fascist ramifications to honor Good, by revealing the state rot she died to expose, while touching on historical and poetic examples side by side, as the Gothic does. Source: Paul Walsh and Jeff Days. Mother identifies woman shot, killed by ICE agent. This write-up is part of my Sex Positivity book series, which continues after its June 2025 finale, and small-form content, e.g. essays on and interviews with other sex workers, all of whom I credit on my acknowledgements pages and sex work page. This essay doesn't focus on sex work itself, but widespread exploitation, i.e. in a shared predatory system whoring labor out. Disclaimer regarding essay contents: all opinions are my own, i.e. as part of my research conducted alongside my book series, Gothic Communism. The material within is written, speaks about public figures, and popular media for purposes of sex education, satire, transformation, and critique, hence falls under fair use regarding copyright and free speech regarding defamation, obscenity laws. Click here for my entire series disclaimer. Lastly, many of the links on this page lead to my age-gated 18 and up website where my entire work on Gothic communism is stored and exhibited. Content warning: racism, genocide and fascism, murder, rape and tokenism, vampirism, the Gothic, monsters and themes, e.g. werewolves, dragons and cannibalism, one censored artistic nude. Rape meaning, for my definition, to disempower someone or somewhere, a person, culture, or place in order to harm them, generally through fetishizing and alienizing acts or circumstances, socio-material conditions that target the mind, body, and or spirit. Rape can be of the mind, spirit, body, and or culture, the land or things tied to it during genocide, etc. It can be individual and or on a mass scale. To it, we honor Renee's courage by fighting back against state powers ourselves. The wolf is loose, the call coming from inside the house. Specifically, the White House is currently and falsely calling Good a domestic terrorist. As cops always say, the ICE agents feared for their lives, i.e. the gunman in question apparently run over by Good's car as it drove away from them, using these fabrications to justify shooting her twice in the head, and all with presidential backing post hoc. Trump didn't give the order, but he covered it up and paid those directly responsible tied to policies he and his cronies enacted, re ICE. The woman screaming was obviously a professional agitator, and the woman driving the car was very disorderly, obstructing and resisting, who then violently, willfully, and viciously ran over the ICE officer, unquote. Except this wasn't the kind of sucks-to-be-them violence the middle class, whole or in part, can just ignore, e.g. an immigrant deputy killing a white woman or a white police sergeant gone rogue killing a black man. Instead, yesterday's stochastic terrorism, an out-and-out execution that martyred Good in front of the entire city, was demonstrably paid for by the state, hence drops the usual fence-sitters of easy excuses. Intra-racial violence of the same class at odds, a middle-aged and middle-class white man killing a middle-class white woman on the other side of the fence. There's no one left to blame, save the victims or their killers, so the state lies, doing so to everyone's faces before closing ranks. Ve victis. Still think Blue Lives Matter? Minneapolis, a queer metropolis historically visited from outside and within by encroaching fascism, is America's Weimar Berlin. Guess what that makes Trump? Trump's words here are a bold-faced lie, one committed by a convicted felon, rapist, and war criminal with immunity from criminal prosecution. In short, it's Darvo and obscurantism as power aggregates. Darvo equals deny accuser, reverse victim offender, a classic abuser's tactic that alongside obscurantism, the theft of symbols and language, e.g. the crooked cross, fascists love to abuse, i.e. while infiltrating communist circles and any liberals, so-called progressives, enabling them. As power aggregates, conducted by Tin Star bandits with badges, performing counter-revolutionary action on home soil versus overseas in Venezuela. Predation is predation. A chain of state vampirism, its subsequent lycanthropy, are a fascism and werewolves, but also rabies, flowing straight to the top from all corners of the empire. Fascism and wolves go hand in hand with state predation, and older blood libel, sodomy, and witchcraft accusations besides just vampires, but I digress. Ian Harvey writes, by late 1944, even Hitler and his top men, including Joseph Goebbels, knew the war would soon be over. They realized that they couldn't pull victory from the jaws of defeat. Instead, they chose to delay the inevitable in the hope that they could devise a more favorable scenario for Germany. Historian Perry Biddenscombe explains in his book Werewolf, The History of the National Socialist Guerrilla Movement, 1944 to 1946, that Goebbels came up with the idea to exploit the werewolf legend. In early 1945, Biddenscombe notes, broadcasts began nationwide urging citizens to join the werewolf movement. He describes one broadcast in which a woman posing as a werewolf says, Lily, the werewolf is my name. I bite, I eat, I am not tame. My werewolf teeth bite the enemy. Unquote. Source, Nazi Werewolves, the secret Nazi guerrilla organization. Again, it's stochastic, something to enact without direct orders, per case, but felt shock and awe through the system, i.e., while overwhelming its sensibilities through bald-faced lie and naked force. Imagine a domestic abuser battering his housewife on a macro scale without pause, and you essentially get the picture. Total authority to act with impunity against a local populace, a assigned victim by federal police, capital violence versus state-local authorities. They're in conflict, zombie bureaucrats and paramilitaries tugging back and forth, while state imperialism sails home, aka military urbanism. However, instead of targeting one minority, say George Floyd and other POCs in inner-city environments, redlining and racial violence, now cops, class traders, are attacking white middle-class activists in suburban neighborhoods with a cultural character tied to identity politics. Renee Good was a queer abolitionist killed by white supremacists. It's Kent State but taken to the streets, to kill you meddling kids, without irony and open season, through maximalist outcomes. The proverbial end of the line, capital and decay merging conflicts of class, culture, and race to target anyone who resists. This is how fascism ultimately works, i.e. imperialism come home to empire, gradually expanding crackdowns mid-decay while preparing for war abroad. R.E., quote, the growth of fascist tendencies is a sign of the weakening of the rule of financial capital. It is a sign of the deepening of the crisis, a sign that finance capital can no longer rule the old forms. It must turn to the more open and more brutal and terroristic methods, not as the exception but as the rule, for the oppression of the population at home and preparation for war abroad. It is preventative counter-revolution, an attempt to head off the rise of the revolutionary upsurge of the masses. Unquote. Earl Browder wrote this for the Extraordinary Party Conference in New York, 1933. Nazis occupied America back then, and still do, with America historically founded on slavery and genocide, leaving land and labor side by side. However, they only come back insofar as they never left, only waiting to go mask off once more. The White Castle turning black, boom or bust. So it has, minus any irony/camp, while the grim harvest rears its ugly head once more. Quote, when such a castle appears, it is time to be afraid. The colonial harvest is at hand. Yet precisely because the state does not hold a monopoly over violence, terror, and morphological expression, a demon or castle needn't spell our end. It can represent our sole means of attack, reclaiming said poetic's endless inventiveness to turn colonizer fears back into their hopelessly scared brains. Unquote. Source: Praise Liberators. To honor Renee and her martyring at state hands, become what the state fears, what it and its core jesters can't control, even through lethal force and performative centrist heroism above. Not for lack of trying, capital pimps workers by design, states' rights versus worker rights. R.E. Quote, capitalism has no use for people who see each other as human. It wants us dehumanizing ourselves so capital can function as normal, moving money through nature at the cost of human life. Capitalism needs us to die, so we need to remember and honor Nexus humanity. Unquote. Source: Remember the Fallen, an ode to Next Benedict. The same goes for Good, Floyd, and anyone else, i.e., in the same boat, martyred or waiting to be martyred. Those the state capital destroys on purpose, grist for the mill. So do workers render into feed by givers of state violence, cops the false hero suppliers kettling capital's usual victims. Some people push back. To it, asymmetrical warfare is paramount, our only recourse, i.e., dialectically materially reversing abjection, us versus them, alienation and fetishization, to bounce our abusers' weaponry back at them, namely psychological warfare, but really any kind of war, class, culture, and race, tying first to each other and then to monopolies of violence, terror, and bodily expression. R.E. Weber, Esprit, and me. See the stated key tools from paratextual Gothic documents. We're all gorgons to behead, and yet pre, mid, post-decapitation, we become a vital means of poetically reminding our attackers how mortal and venal they truly are, their true colors. Freudian symbolism aside, this happens by logistically spreading resistance out, meaning over such a large area, concerning such a massive population, across such a prolonged window of time and headspace, as to expose state illusions, that our jailers cannot hold such positions, dooming their actions from the start. In short, their power is largely false, insofar as they posture to bolster the perception of total control, while mythical, such states of emergency, an exception, i.e., the state of emergency applied to recipients of state violence made exception, or as Giorgio Agamben writes in State of Exception, 2005, quote, a special condition in which the juridical order is actually suspended due to an emergency or a serious crisis threatening the state. In such a situation, the sovereign, i.e. the executive power, prevails over the others, and the basic laws and norms can be violated by the state while facing the crisis. Unquote. And their terror dialogues abjecting labor escalate by design. Even so, these monopolies remain impossible, e.g. terror or counter-terror, in a given direction. Quote, not only can terror be employed as a weapon, but any weapon can become a weapon of terror. Terror is a weapon is terror, and no one agency monopolizes it. Terror is the kissing cousin of force, and real or implied, is never far removed from the pages of history. To define and condemn terror from a peculiar social, economic, political, and emotional plane is to display a self-righteous attitude that, totally unrealistic, is doomed to be disappointed by harsh facts. Unquote. Source: Robert Esprit's War in the Shadows. Furthermore, the mechanisms at work remain forever at play, in ways that not only demand, but grant leverage for labor to use, versus state composites, our own aggregate sharing the stage. Furthermore, such things cannot be passed off to other places, e.g. Ted Stomer, while espousing Cold War myths about the Soviets, scapegoating them for capital at large, writes, what happens when America exports abusive authority? Europe is finding out. With all due respect, Ted, but we're finding out too. What we've been shipping to Latin America, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia for generations, Americans are receiving now, and always have, owing to America's perennial function both as settler colony and police state, as I respond. Quote, America has been exporting fascism since its inception. The Nazis borrowed their ideas from Jefferson. NATO's peace through strength is itself just Western liberalism and capitalist hegemony dressed up as defensive weapons. It's always been a lie with a short shelf life. Also, Locke's a jerk, as are all Enlightenment thinkers. A government built on Cartesian thought, nuclear models serving state interests, not workers. Always. The middle class, historically white straight men, decay when threatened to fascistically defend capital, given expanded rights to defend capital, Ari Zinn, and whose rights are simultaneously threatened through decay into false rebellion, Ari Dutt and Lenin, Parenti, 1935 and 1997. Capital decays by design. Fascism isn't a glitch of capital and state power, but a feature. and turned the end of history after the Cold War carried on into the same old decay from Western powers. Liberalism and fascism are two sides of the same coin, defending and expanding capital under capitalist realism. Any alternative to capital was simply the end of the world. Yet here we are. I digress. These wolves are frightened bullies given license to kill. Men like Good's killer above, greedily exchanging humanity for chances to kill, thus become arbitrary and temporary expendable givers of state corporate skullduggery. As Mussolini, the founder of fascism, writes, fascism should more properly be called corporatism because it is the merger of state and corporate power. Trump and his tech bros, the pirates of Silicon Valley, fit Mussolini's description to a T. Stopping them in their cloak and dagger bullshit demands immediate action, specifically intersectional solidarity/tactical unity, exposing state lies, i.e. that their victim Good was somehow an aggressor fleeing the scene. The state lies by design, every utterance a confession under capitalist realism, re Darvo and obscurantism. Imagine every villain in every novel, movie, or video game, then make it real. Imagine the perpetrators of every America-backed regime overseas, then apply it to wherever you are. It's Israel versus Hamas come home to roost, and this is only the beginning. They've crossed the Rubicon, sacking Rome from inside itself. The Gothic fire is actually insiders blaming outsiders while fleecing the locals. Fascism is like cancer, one that, if left unchecked, will only grow and spread. To tolerate ISIS presence anywhere is to help them grow and spread, e.g. Bad Empanada saying, "Go to town, Donald," while celebrating accelerationism. To do so invites disaster en masse, loosing the wolf to feed. Indeed, while its hunger knows no bounds, neither does the cowardice of traitors. Regarding intersectional solidarity and tactical unity, during intersectional consciousness, a neologism I coined, one meant to combat various forms of reductionism, class culture, and race, i.e. by building on Marx's notion of class consciousness, combining class with culture and race, consciousness, awareness, to raise emotional Gothic intelligence while synthesizing praxis. Simply put, Gothic has that mood, that cool factor to do the trick, i.e. by subverting monstrous language, which normally dehumanizes workers and nature through popular stories furthering objection, us versus them, to suitably humanize the harvest, which capital and its realism can only pimp out when vengefully raping nature as monstrous feminine whore. The whore's revenge against profit, then, is to fuck back on the same aegis, i.e. when the man comes around, show him your aegis. Medusa demonstrates there is power in what they try to control. Take it back by using it in ways they can't steal from you. Become the Gorgon. Segregation is no defense. To fight back is to paradoxically expose ourselves, put ourselves at risk, essentially terrifying state actors into acts of mounting aggression, the rapist enraged by the word no, given chase before ultimately tiring out the means to continue. Now is not the time for fearful inaction. It's time for revolutionary optimism. The state is the enemy who fears worker unity because their power over workers, meaning real power as they're selling it, is a bluff, a fiction woven while empire is weak. Yes, force factors in, but only for state actors to mask how weak, vampiric, they actually are. Cuckoos, they will push others to death rivers, concentration camps, and all while acting indigenous themselves. They're imposters of the highest order. Meanwhile, every mechanism of foreign policy will come home, guided by every dogma and stereotype the state can draft, i.e. Cartesian thought, heteronormativity, and settler colonialism. Any and all pushing myths about goblins and vampires, etc., as imprecating language of persecution. On to state prey when state predators, cops, are the guilty ones, eating the populace in broad daylight, the cats who ate the canary in the coal mine. The state will call us enemy at the gate, useless eater, and terrorist, etc., doing so in front of others to encourage tokenism, the more the merrier. To resist them is to take our power back, paid unpaid forms reversing the flow of power on the aegis, i.e. while sharing the same spaces, bodies, and language the state does, e.g. illustrators and sex workers disrupting the state apparatus by reminding others we're still human mid-alienization. Common ground and common language hailing from rape when in Rome. This requires exposure, and exposure is always to some degree an act of naked resistance. To use a less literal example, the unity of the locals chasing ice off, all clothed as far as I know, is encouraging, while trying to help their fallen neighbor versus turning tail, i.e., in a deadly game of chicken, both sides showing their asses, so to speak. Retreat is weakness for fascists, their Roman fools' desire to return and give them what for, only dooming them and theirs, to a war they cannot win, with death before dishonor being the state's swan-song refrain, i.e., while gobbling ice up for fodder, usually convicts owing Trump a pardon, pushing the death spiral all the harder into an early grave. What's more, such things historically materially repeat everywhere. This means the same choice we face, dialectically materially subverting state predation to fatal degrees as Good did, were once faced a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. E.g. by German teenagers in World War II. Quote, "Nothing is more dishonorable for a civilized people than to let itself be governed without resistance by an irresponsible clique of rulers devoted to dark instincts. Is it not true that every honest German today is ashamed of his government? And who among us can sense the dimensions of the dishonor that will lie upon us and our children once the veil has fallen from our eyes and the most horrid and extravagant crimes come to light? If German people are already so corrupted and spiritually crushed that they do not raise a hand, frivolously trusting in a questionable faith in the lawful order of history, if they surrender man's highest principle, that which raises him above all other God's creatures, his free will, if they abandon the determination to take decisive action and turn the wheel of history and thus subject it to their own rational decision, if they are so devoid of all individuality, have already gone so far along the road to turning into a spiritless and cowardly mass, then they clearly deserve their downfall." Unquote. Source: Leaflets of the White Rose. 1. 1942. Alas, all states die, and die the same basic way. Ergo, the same statements Scholl and her friends made apply to America, meaning before, during, and after the White Rose came and went. Nazi Germany purporting local lies, which continue unfolding into global reckonings, both inspired by and inheriting from, reabsorbed into the land of the free, home of the brave, the mantle of empire. So do feckless old men send others to fight and die in their endless, unwinnable wars. In keeping with our domestic abuse motif, you can't fix him. The wolf is loose, lying through his teeth while eating you alive. If you give him what he wants, he still wants you. Indeed, he's paid to eat you, doing so with a smile, re happily defending capital from workers exercising their rights in times of crisis. Little wolves of armed subservience, fighting for scraps while starving and sated with blood, from kill to kill while capital's top dogs glut themselves on truckloads of carrion. Likewise, it's the fox's job to turn a blind eye, appease tyranny as it starts to blossom, e.g. American Democrats and token moderates of all kinds. R.A. me, vis-a-vis Malcolm X. C. sharing the blame. Aiding the posturing strongman acting strong, strong, strong. The dragon doesn't pork up on his own. He has help, if only stealing empire from older criminals, A.G. Tolkien's pale enchanted gold below, neatly symbolizing the cutthroat nature of American politics. Dragons, wolves, or vampires, the state cannot monopolize animal metaphors, any more than own vampirism to tokenize upstarts, i.e. the means of production, the base, per Marx. Capital is dead labor that, vampire-like, only lives by sucking living labor, and lives the more labor it sucks. Source: Limits of the Working Day, 1867. All the same, the state is currently recuperating and foisting former struggles of older social movements and poetics, the superstructure, onto the middle class, demanding loyalty through blood, i.e. by acting like a wolf in ways that further objection, sending power vampirically towards the bourgeoisie. Giving them what they want means surrendering your land, labor, and lives. The usual traitors are cops playing soldier, doing so in ways that end catastrophically for all, smaller scapegoats leading to bigger ones, ergo, betrayals. First in tragedy, then in farce, wrote Marx in 1885, the 18th Brumaire. Fascism is a death cult, and the state is fascist. Fascism defends capital, which demands death cults raping a protesting populace into submission time and time again. Even retreat is death, re as Good shows us, i.e. as the news starts to close, the hangman throttling those who resist alongside those who don't. So is pacifism, trafficking with the enemy, and the enemy always strong and weak. Source: Umberto Eco's Fascism. A cop's a cop, a pimp's a pimp, judge, jury, and executioner, seeking revenge versus workers who dare punch up. Little doomsdays precede and beget bigger ones above. Sadly, that hour isn't nigh. It's already here. With it, we cannot afford to stay still and hope they ignore us. RE, for the state rapes by design, happy to make the headlines provided no one fights back in ways that challenge state positions. The rapist will only take advantage, revel in the fight its prey puts up. The only way to stop them is to fight back, no compromise, e.g., I am a rape victim, and my grandfather fought for the Dutch resistance, neither which avoided total devastation without a fight. Or in the words of Frederick Douglass, there must be struggle. The assigned servants and slaves must call the state's bluff, collectively disobeying purported masters, arm in arm mid-dialectic, lest the wolf eat everything in sight, the big bad one. Read the room. It's a kennel, one caging cop and victim side by side. Surrounded by martyrs like Good, we live in Gothic times. Honor her sacrifice by fighting back, not just for her or yourselves, but for all our yesterdays into the future. Abolish ICE and transform capital, dismantling state capacity for harm. Speak out, for silence is death. The state is death, regarding state violence against workers, nature, and the world at large. Thank you for listening. My name's Persephone Waard. I have my MA in Gothic English Literature, an independent PhD in Gothic Poetics and Ludo-Gothic BDSM, focusing partially on Metroidvania, and I am the author of the multi-volume, nonprofit book series Sex Positivity. Its art director, sole invigilator, illustrator, and primary editor, the other co-writer, co-editor being Bay Ryan. I'm a male-to-female trans woman, Tolkien Amazon enthusiast, anti-fascist, atheist, and Satanist, polypan kingster, erotic artist, pornographer, and anarcho-communist. Originally, this blog explored my love of movies when I was cishet. Now I use it to write about the Gothic, horror, but also sex, heavy metal, and video games in a queer way, especially Metroidvania. You can financially support my blog through Ko-fi or Patreon. One is safe for work, and the other not safe for work, but the money for either goes towards the same art and essays I produce, which often complement each other. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay safe out there. Good luck.